I think we'll just cover our main points, which often I like to lead these things with the misconceptions that, the confusion that people have. And so Heather can weigh in. But I think that there needs to be a conversation around the difference between clean eating and metabolic eating. So I think a lot of people find that they are um, eating clean and wonder why they plateau or wonder why they uh, aren't losing weight. And it's very different because clean, you can reduce some of the inflammation, which may account for some of the weight gain in the beginning. But everyone will plateau if they're just eating clean and not eating metabolically. And so that's one of the things that we'll talk about. And then the second big misconception I find is people either are only looking at what they eat or when they eat and not both. So, in order to achieve metabolic goals, you need to look at what you're eating and when you're eating. That will give you the most sustainable long term progress. But going in one area versus another causes a real problem. And then, probably the third piece is looking at like what might be hindering that, whether that be some kind of imbalance in your digestive system or an imbalance hormonally. So making sure that you're looking at a big picture of the imbalances. So I'd say those three things kind of become the areas where people make the most amount of mistakes. And so, we'll dive into those three areas, mostly the first two, um, and talk about probably the different options that are available to you for weight loss, whether you seek them out long distance or whether you do them through us. So those are the things that I find that people make errors on and the things I'd like to talk about. And again, if you have questions, we'll turn it to you guys too for specifics. Heather is a wonderful nurse practitioner, and we collaborate often on health goals for people, looking at both from a functional and diagnostic perspective, looking at a variety of different strategies, uh, uh, and really kind of help people achieve their goals. Because having the broader, bigger picture, the most amount of information is really helpful. So, Heather, what do you find happens metabolically or in weight loss that people might be either not aware of or making mistakes on? I know we'll probably agree on many things, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we agree on most of this. The things I see most often are snacking, eating too frequently, not doing muscle work or resistance training, and just having too high of a proportion of carbs, even if they're good quality carbs, with our lifestyle in America, we just cannot burn as many carbs as we traditionally are eating. Because we're mostly sitting at desks or whatever. Our lifestyles are not active like other parts of the world where they have to walk and work physically to get food or make food, clean, whatever. So those are the two main things I see, but definitely, as Laura mentioned, checking hormones and insulin levels will be very beneficial to find things that are in our way.
And Heather does such a great job of always reminding all of us of the exercise piece to it. I often spend so much time on the food piece that I'm not in conversation as much about the movement piece. One of the things I say to people is you you're not active enough to justify all those carbs, right? But sometimes with a level of inflammation, people aren't able to get to the place of exercise where they need to be. But movement is the greatest place to start, and movement is hugely important. So even if you can only do a little bit of resistance training, cardiovascular is really important, and Heather can speak to that. I love how she talks about insulin and exercise. The snacking piece, the when we eat is hugely important. Intermittent fasting is such a common term. It's thrown out there. It's often misunderstood. People think that they're only intermittent fasting if they're without eating during the day. And that is a form of intermittent fasting, but we're all intermittent fasting when we sleep. So we all do it. The body's hardwired to do it. When we release melatonin somewhere around 9:30, which is that sleep hormone, it suppresses insulin production. So we are not meant to eat in the darkness. Like our bodies are not wired to do that. And so taking those 8 hours and expanding them into 12 hours, 14 hours is really important to give our body more time to just deal with inflammation, toxins, things that we're absorbing into our body, even if we're not eating them. And so it's the downtime, it's the recovery, even in exercise and sports nutrition, recovery is such a fundamental part of the conversation now. So, and not snacking, like allowing your body to digest the meal and not anything else, not the layering, like give yourself a chance um, to even get hungry. And some people are like, well, I'm hungry. If you've trained your stomach to eat, it's going to signal you that you need to eat. And it's going to take a few days to make that adjustment. But don't let your stomach be your brain. That's the thing I tell people all the time. Who says you have to eat? Just because your stomach says you have to eat. Most of the time, we've trained our stomach to respond accordingly.
Or sometimes your body's telling you that because you haven't gotten the nutrients you need. Because if our food's not nutrient dense enough, then it's asking, well, I still didn't get enough, whatever nutrient, I eat more. And that's the
Totally
answer is not eating more, but eating better.
eating better. And that's in the what we eat too, right? My kids we used to, if we go on vacation and stay at a family and they were eating things that we didn't normally eat, they were insatiably all hungry all the time. I was like, I don't understand. For a while, I didn't understand. Like, why are you hungry all the time? But they were so used to getting nutrient dense foods. And that is the thing too, when I'm working with people, Heather may see this too, is that if people are on some kind of elimination, on some kind of diet, and they're saying that they're hungry, I'm always like, are you getting enough protein? Are you getting enough healthy fats? Are you getting enough color foods? So those polyphenols, those antioxidants, all that nutrition density, because if nutritionally dense enough, we actually need very little food, especially as we get older and our metabolism slows down.
Yes.
We want to make the most of the calories we do eat. So the more that Alzheimer's is understood from a functional perspective, and Heather can contribute to this too, there's different like sub-diagnoses. So there's vascular dementia, which is inflammation, right, in the vascular system. There's type 3 diabetes, which really is going to be diet. Um, there are environmental toxins, which is going to then go back to your detox pathways. Um, the sleep component, to me, one of the coolest things that happens during sleep is our brain actually shrinks. Like it actually, like a sponge goes, and inflammation, like toxins that have kind of got, it's literally like squeezing the sponge. It's like the toxins come out and through the cerebral spinal fluid, they exit and leave the body through our systems of elimination. So it goes hand in hand with being able to like uh, pee and have a daily bowel movement and really clean out your pipes with that daily bowel movement. That kind of is part of that whole making sure your detox system is working correctly. Um, the burden that we place on our body on a daily basis is become very difficult for us to keep up with. So in the study of genomics, the risk factors, it started with 2 risk factors for Alzheimer's. It's up to like 25 or something like that. We're all at risk for this. And as we subtype it and we learn, so within genetic risk, at most 30% is where genetic risk lies. 70% is epigenetics, which is the environment we put the cell in. And then the collision of that becomes anything, right? So allowing sleep, maximizing sleep and detox is a combination of the burden we place on it to do on a daily basis and the ability to get that quality sleep. Alcohol, caffeine, they interfere in the quality of sleep.
Yeah.
So they can keep us from having going into REM. And so there's just all kinds of components to this, which is why we started with going, yes, 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 yes. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Heather can weigh in on this now and share from her perspective.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I mean, there's so many reasons that dementia happens, like Laura already said. And so minimizing our risk factors is what we can do, just like minimizing our risk factors for developing heart disease or cancer. Like there are genetic components, but those are not the determinants, generally speaking. So we keep our blood pressure and our blood sugars healthy, and that reduces our risk for heart disease and cancer. So anyway, yeah, and as far as the brain goes, everything Laura said, and so if we're digesting, back to the metabolic thing, if we're digesting while we're supposed to be cleaning out, then that's where the interference comes in, and then it's not maximized, our ability to clean out, and detox isn't maximized due to the things that are happening that shouldn't be happening at that time, like not restful sleep, sleep apnea, and food.
And, things like vascular and blood pressure and breathing, I mean, it's all going to influence our quality of sleep too. How much stress is the body under? This has kind of been my big thing this year, talking about stress in new ways where people understand it. We have such a narrow view of stress, but stress in the body is excess. Anything in excess. So it can be an excess of not enough sleep, or it can be an excess of eating too much sugar. It can be an excess of sedentary. At the same time, it could be an excess of like too much exercise, right? And when that's appropriate to pull back on it. But stress is physical, mental, emotional, sensory. And when you think about excess in those four arenas, sensory, we're always on sensory overload, right? Toxins alone, we're exposed to 600 more toxins than previous generations were. The burden on consuming an antioxidant like glutathione, we just can't even keep it in reserve enough. Like 99.9% of people that are test for glutathione are deficient because we just can't keep up. And so, it's one of my like 5 super supplements I recommend. It's the big one in anti-aging because it's the general of detoxification. And people are like, well, they want to take zinc because of COVID. Well, zinc only works with bacterial. It doesn't work with viral. COVID's a viral infection. It's necessary in any kind of upper respiratory to help, but um, glutathione is the master that doesn't care if it's a virus or bacteria or anything. So there are things that we need to do as part of like thinking about metabolism, which I didn't expect us to do this, but it's a bigger conversation towards aging and how do we age so that we're supporting ourselves in a way where metabolically all these systems are working optimally. So like we're looking at histamines right now as a huge component in blood pressure management. It's kind of a new functional discovery I've made, if you will, in trying to, because every condition is a message from the body, right? It's what is trouble sleeping telling us? What is not having a bowel movement telling us? What is congestion telling us? Because the body is trying to send messages. And it's just a question of what does the message tell us? What does the hormone imbalance tell us about the gut or diet and lifestyle? What are the adrenals telling us so that we can, in the world of education, health education to helping people optimize their health, it's all about helping people understand their body systemically. And to understand your body metabolically, you have to understand your body systemically. And to understand your body metabolically, you have to understand the messages and where your involvement is. And it's not just in what you're eating, right? It's in when you're eating, it's how much of one thing you have to do to compensate for another, right? Is there a supplement we should be taking? Is there minimizing toxins somewhere else to offset the load? Like I make sure all my makeup is clean. Like the last thing I want to do is the things I have control over, right? I want to give myself the most amount of room to carry the most amount of toxins as I age, which means if I'm going to, I mean, right now it's the new year, so I'm all on my cleanse right now. But if I want the flexibility of eating a little bit off my plan, I don't want to be hovering at the edge of the cliff and I fall off. I want to be far enough away from the cliff so that if I, you know, do a little holiday eating, I don't, it's not adding gasoline to an existing fire. But the body's meant to go into nutrition and fasting. Like it's meant to go in and out of the system of nourishing and fasting. You had a question.
Um, so you just gave a longer explanation, a really good explanation for, and I just wanted to see what it was you said. Is having how much of one thing is compensating for another? How did you say that?
Yeah, so imagine, so we either want to constantly work towards neutralizing inflammation, or work towards minimizing toxins to give us more flexibility, right? So, um, things we can't always escape is herbicides and pesticides, right? But and glutathione helps clear that out of the body. Eating organically 100% of the time means we're isolated from social interactions that have to do with food, right? So say we want the flexibility around not eating 100% organic so that we can socialize. Well, where can I remove the toxic load, right? So there's a couple different ways to think about it. One is like I think about when I'm going to go on vacation and I want to loosen the restrictions, I'm really good maybe a week or 2 weeks before that.
Oh.
Like I'm not doing any of whatever, right? I'm in like a fasting protocol, if you will, because again, I want to put myself as far away from the cliff as possible. So when I go on vacation, I have more flexibility. So it's being intentional and mindful with the way that our body carries toxins and inflammation. So one way that I think about it is preparing to off-road. I like that word better than cheating because cheating has such a negative connotation to it, and we all need the flexibility for balance and off-roading. But it also is on a daily basis looking for where are the toxins and where do I have some control over it. For me, clean makeup is like no effort whatsoever. And that means because we ingest 60 some odd percent of what comes on our skin. Our skin is an ingestible organ. It's called transdermal application. And so anything with chemicals, and I try to teach my daughters with that as well. It's like, okay, well, you know, if you don't want you, I'll let you have your mascara. Like, but please make your foundation like, as clean as possible. Lips,
Mhm.
um, I think barium is the chemical in commercial lipsticks that's been linked to breast cancer. They say that on average, women consume about 5 pounds of lipstick in like a few years because it's just easy to put it on and then we eat. We lick our lips, whatever, we drink water. Um, so being intentional like that, means that I might have a little bit more flexibility. Exercise, right? It's like, okay, well, it's winter. I want to eat a little bit more carbs. I'm doing low histamine right now. I increased my exercise immediately because I want to keep my insulin in the same place that it's in. And so it's really too about like if I'm not going to if the winter, if you're really shut in and you can't exercise, I'll walk in place and I have to, and do sit-ups in front of the TV. But there's you have to know where to shift things
Mhm.
so that you're constantly working within your phase of life that you're in, working within the toxic load and how much inflammation you're already carrying, and just kind of trying to balance those scales. I kind of think about it as this imaginary backpack we're all carrying around, and each stressor, excess, inflammation is a brick we put in there. And so how do manage that? I do know that when I work longer hours, I the mental energy I put out is greater. So the stress, I love my job. I don't consider it stress in the typical sense, but the burden on that. So on a day like that, that's not where I'm going to go out to dinner with friends. It's where I'm going to eat really clean and get more sleep and make sure I'm drinking water because I'm trying to offset the load I'm carrying. Does that answer your question
Yeah, and
or more to think about?
well, you just hit a button for me, which is the workload. So for a long time, my work has been what has it has been the de-stressor probably from the rest of life. It has been the thing that helped me offload some of those bricks, but that's transitioned.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing to me that um I guess how applicable that is. And I can see I just reduced my hours um working because I'm so tired, but yet it seems like it's work has always invigorated me, but it doesn't necessarily always invigorate me anymore. And makes me think that what you said is that I was probably stressing my body and didn't even know it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't think when we started this that we would be talking in terms of being metabolically fit as being systemically fit, right? And all the pieces that go into being healthy and optimizing our health. But I mean, really, when you talk to anybody who is really pro-functional, you're eventually going to be talking about the system. Um, but I do think that I mean, just stuff gets harder as we get older. And there's this expectation for us to be constantly producing results, right? Producing
There's
results,
this,
producing results.
there's pressure to age so well. You look so
Yeah,
good. You have so much
well,
energy, which I want, but
I mean, in this country, aging is a
Not honorable.
it's not honorable. Thank you. It's not.
correct.
And when I read about other cultures and how they view aging and how they treat women in the aging process, it is mind blowing. If there's anything you want to do for your health and wellness, look into that. It's truly fascinating that we are so stuck on results and we value youth as a virtue and a commodity to be acquired. And I, all you have to do is spend a few times watch a few minutes watching 20 something year olds on a reality show and go, I don't wish I was ever there again, right? you know, I love the wisdom and the knowledge I've acquired, but at the same time, I'd like to make sure that my quality of life is within that I am optimizing and doing everything I can to make the most out of it so that I can go, I did my best. The pursuit of excellence instead of perfection, right? Perfectionism is a disorder. It's the pursuit of excellence to make sure that I'm always meeting each decade with grace and going, okay, this is the time that I shift. And
Yeah.
it's sometimes not easy to do. I think food is the thing culturally that everyone looks away when we do it poorly. Like it's and we're even moving away from being able to have healthy conversations about it because we're supposed to be supporting people's image, and I'm all about people loving themselves, but I'm also about people caring for themselves. And if we stop talking about food and nutrition and lifestyle and all this as being to the detriment of our health, we're not serving younger generations. We need to accept each other, but we need to have honest conversations, and we're losing the ability to have that.
A statement you made that I wrote down that made me think our quality of life should be appropriate for this age.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
my quality of life isn't what it was when I was in my 20s and 30s,
No.
but it needs to be appropriate for
Yeah.
where I am now.
Yeah. Yeah. I covet my sleep now.
Mhm.
I am, very adamant that to my children, I gave up enough sleep raising three kids, right? Any mom can attest to all the sleep that we were deprived of, all the nutrients that left our body if we nursed, if we were pregnant, right? All the things that we gave up. And it is our time to really nurture ourselves, right?
And one thing that my husband and I have done for family dinners is like, no, we're not eating at 8 o'clock.
That's right.
We're not. Your
Exactly.
dad and I can't do that anymore.
Yes.
Or your dad and I will eat, and then y'all can come warm it up later.
Yes. Yes.
But
That was a shift I had to do in my family. My kids are athletes, dancers, and family dinner time was hugely important. And right around the time I turned 50, it's like I can't eat this way anymore. And started doing warm it up. I'll sit down with you, have a cup of tea, or just sit with you and have water and, approach it differently. But yeah, it is,
yeah,
right?
eating late is not appropriate for me now.
Right. And the expectation that we should fit into this standard. I tell people when they're working with a personal trainer, when they go online with social media, if that personal trainer is in their 20s, like you can't listen to their nutritional advice for somebody that is in menopause. They don't understand it. And what works for a 20-year-old might work for a 30 something year old. It's not going to work for somebody in their 40s, definitely not in their 50s. And we want to make sure that anything that we're doing doesn't become stress, doesn't become excess. Yeah. Thoughts, comments? Yes. Of life, right? Yeah. And the way that age is looked at in this country and culture. And
Yes, and so I was gonna, I don't know if the primary purpose of this had to do with, you've said several times, systemic versus metabolic. And so the metabolic piece is this fasting kind of thing, right? The what you eat and when you eat.
yeah, you could say that to optimize your metabolism, there's four pieces to it. What and when you eat, exercise, sleep. So what, when, sleep, exercise. Four. There's four pieces to being metabolically fit.
Would you say them again?
The what you eat, when you eat, sleep, and exercise.
Oh, okay.
But I'm gonna also say that what you eat has to do with whether or not you need supplements, and then, that's a little bit of a bigger picture. But the difference between, and kind of where I started with, the difference between clean versus metabolic is like oatmeal is clean. It may not metabolize because it's a high carb, right? It's not going to burn as efficiently. So things in like the world of animal proteins, it, in general, it's just a generalization to help just bring a point. The larger the animal, the longer it takes to digest. So eating pork isn't the same metabolically as eating fish.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah. And it's why some people can do fine on a high protein diet, but it's also why some people don't. Because after a certain period of time, in order to get the variety out of high protein, if somebody started out not eating red meat, but then they added it, then they can slow down or taper off, or right. There's all kinds of ways that we're so about comfort and our own gratification in the culture we live in. We're all victim to it. I'm victim to it too. And so like doing something for a period of time we can lose interest in it really quickly. And every time there's progress on a diet out there, it doesn't take long before it enters the grocery store into some kind of legal version of it, right? Like when I first started years ago, if you took people off gluten, they lost weight, they got better. It was the only processed carb out there. And then gluten free hit the market, right? And then we became grain free. And then all these like grain free products came out. And then we did Whole 30, right? You can see what's trended through the years nutritionally based on how it's entered processed food. And now we're at keto because we've got all these paleo legal, grain free processed food out there. And now I do think I'm really seeing how histamines plays a part in this because this is what's happened now. This is where we're at because we've all done these things to try and keep ourselves entertained with food and keep ourselves compliant, but we're breaking the laws of nature all the time, and then there's consequences to pay. And again, we all pay them. We just have to decide how much we want to pay and for how long. It's all our choice, right?
well, that gives me too much responsibility. I just can't handle that responsibility.
I tell you. I'll tell you.
Mm,
I'll tell you. I love how Heather, I'm gonna ask her to jump in here. I love how she talks about exercise and insulin. And so I'm gonna ask her to share that piece about the muscles and carbs and things like that, because she does a really excellent job about that. And I think it's a great, because we talked about the when, and I now just talked about the what. We've talked a lot about sleep, and so we'll talk about exercise some.
So I really appreciated your comment about that gives me too much responsibility. First, I'll make this comment. And it's really true how hard it is to choose foods that were made to have, that follow the laws of nature, eating in the season, eating whole, real food. It's difficult here to do that because we're surrounded with everything else, and everyone else is eating all of the unnatural foods, and it just is very, very hard. Even so, the more like our goal is just to keep educating and helping people understand why they need to make the hard choices or why it would benefit them. because it's just really difficult. Like my kids are trying to like eat healthy for 1 month after Christmas holiday, and they're just surrounded by junk all the time, everywhere. Every instance, every activity is just full of junk. And it's really our country has allowed this to be, and I'm just helping you to be aware. I just feel like maybe if people could be aware that the reality is in our country, we've allowed big food to make the decisions. And so everything around us is not good for us for the most part. And making the decisions is really hard. And just recognizing that reality of our culture maybe will empower us a little bit more, and being more educated about what the um, junk food or processed foods, whatever we want to call it, is doing to our bodies when we put it in our mouth. Maybe that will give us a little bit more power to make the choices, but it's really difficult to make the choices because everywhere you go, it's not easy. The easy thing is the easy thing that put us where we are. Okay, so exercise and metabolism. So one of the pieces I was thinking when I came in, I was a little interrupted, and then I came in and heard you talk about maybe cheating or off-roading. And so the more muscle mass we have, the easier it is to have little instant hiccups, maybe you would call them, because our muscles are burning, making our metabolism faster. They make our bodies more sensitive to insulin. Insulin resistance is where we have high levels of insulin in our bodies. Most people in America, the majority, I don't know what the percent is, have insulin resistance because we just eat too many carbs or too frequently. And so we release insulin out of our pancreas, and then our cells just get numb to it. Just like if you were doing something over and over again, like you would get tired of it, you would get numb to it. Our cells are numb to the insulin because of the excess, and they're not allowing it to work. So then that's another reason why we feel hungry all the time, because the glucose is not getting into the cells where it needs to be to energize the cell, because the insulin receptor is broken or numb to the insulin. So that's what insulin resistance is. Muscle work, resistance training, whether you're using weights or bands, but it actually has to work your muscles, increases insulin sensitivity, and that will improve your metabolism. The less sugar we have floating around in our bloodstreams, the better metabolism is going to be. Sugar and insulin just put on fat. Like sugar, excess sugar is stored as fat. Insulin is a fat storage hormone. It also creates inflammation every time it comes out of your pancreas. So, um, having muscles, the muscles use up the glucose. Like if we're working out with resistance, then those muscles that we're working will be using the blood sugar that's floating around your bloodstream, which is a good thing. Because we don't want excess sugar floating around. It damages our blood vessels, damages our brain, our kidneys, everything. So that's why muscle work, even though I just started believing in it in the last 5 years or so, I used to be like, who wants to do weights? Like cardio is so much more better because you have this high and everything. But it really changes your body composition. It really changes the density of your bones, if we're thinking about the future, and really changes your metabolism. So you're burning more energy while you're sitting still. Hopefully, we don't sit still all day long. But yeah, have more muscles, better metabolism, better blood sugars, better insulin sensitivity, better brain health.
And it all works together too, right? Because the quality of your food is going to give you a good sustained energy to exercise too, right? I mean, and allow you to be less inflamed and then less prone to injury. I mean, as we get older, we have to be concerned about, injuring ourselves and working with someone that understands how to, increase resistance and weight as you get older. But you can start small, and it doesn't even have to be. It's about making sure you're just out of your comfort zone, right? Like even if it's running for 10 more minutes or doing 10 more reps or 5 more reps or reaching for the higher weight and just doing it one time. Like it's you can do it with baby steps because there's, again, the time of our life and what needs to be. I mean, I saw this new thing about chair yoga versus, especially for abs, versus that thing in the weight room where you like have to
Oh,
hold your upper body up, right? Like you can get so much inflammation in your shoulders doing that thing, but they're even saying the results are better in the chair. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be fancy, and it doesn't have to be in excess. It just has to be moving you towards the goal. And if your body composition isn't motivating enough for you, think about something else that might help you own that much more discipline this year, whether it's your brain health.
or balance, reducing falls, increasing bone density for thinking about
Bone
our
density.
futures.
Yeah.
We really need that, and also reducing injury by having the muscle stability around our joints, whether it's stepping off a curb and hurting your ankle, getting out of your car and hurting your knee. Like the more muscle stability we have around our joints, then the more functional we're going to be in life. The more we can get our suitcase down off the airplane or out of the attic or whatever, functional, and then balance for the future. We don't want to be falling in our shower, which is a real, it's real. Those are real life things. So
It is
Yeah.
real. Just fell in the garage and couldn't pull myself up, and I broke my ribs. And I was walking on the well, it's been a couple years,
Is this
3 years ago now.
recent?
No, this was like 5 years ago. And
Oh,
then
okay.
I think it was the next year, I was on the way to a wedding and the sidewalks on
Yeah.
Old Town Portland were crooked and I fell and I broke both my arms.
Yeah. Okay.
wow, we
So
And I'm
sorry.
like, yeah, just saying, yeah, this is like
Yeah.
very real. And
Mhm.
Yeah. There's a great documentary on Netflix called Game Changer. Um, yeah, be careful with documentaries that take a hardcore position
Right.
against a particular food. So I just want to say that disclaimer because they're really promoting veganism, and
Mhm.
I don't promote that. That's a fasting protocol. But the most interesting thing was when they studied Roman gladiators, and they thought from I guess it would be like a anthropological study. I mean, this is how paleo came to be, is because an anthropologist looked at Paleolithic man and said, "Oh, no illness and disease existed." And that must be the diet, right? But in with Roman gladiators, they expected them to be meat eaters, to be carnivores, and it turned out that they were vegan because the vegetables were the luxury commodity of the day. And in order to improve muscle integrity, they gave them fruits and vegetables. And what wound up happening is that they were able to discover the bone density on these guys was amazing. And so it's brought this whole conversation about what is bone density, and it's not just about calcium or vitamin D or vitamin K for D for calcium. It's really about the integrity of our muscles, our joints, and our bones based on all the nutrients
They require
they require and that we get from foods of color.
and the sunshine.
Things like blueberries, right? They reduce brain plaque to go back to it's even being studied in the Center for Age-Related Diseases, right? We get plaque on our brain just like we do on our teeth. And what are we doing for that, right? I mean, we want to do things like all those brain exercises to stimulate synapses and we want to sleep, but the importance of like food for ourselves as we age. And all those foods that help us age metabolize really fast and efficient. because the body wants to get them right where they need to be really fast. Your dark leafy greens, your dark berries, you're rich in orange, uh, all those foods. Highly alkaline. Cancer cells have a much harder time replicating in a slightly alkaline environment. And all alkaline foods are the fastest metabolizers. They're used by the body much more efficiently than anything on the acidic side. So it's another way of like fundamentally looking at how our body fits into the laws of nature.
Right. And sugar and carbs increase acidity in our bodies, not just citrus and tomatoes.
Oh yeah.
People think, yeah.
No, because like
We-
lemons and they're highly alkaline. They may have acid in them, but the effect on our blood is alkaline. Acids are most grains, chemicals, alcohol,
Sugar.
sugar, um, even animal protein is on the acidic side. So it's again, how do we maximize any amount of animal protein we do? Because you look at the acidic side, and the only thing that really has any nutritional value are the animal proteins. Like sometimes I'm reserving that one thing on my plate for either a protein or a low or an alkaline grain. And the rest of it is like lots of color, um, trying to get both green and either an orange or a red in, so that I'm maximizing the nutrient density, maybe even sometimes three, like uh, kind of a salad or a raw with a cooked, and then another one. So
Okay.
like it might be like, a little bit of sweet potato, cut up apple, and some sauteed spinach or cabbage
Okay.
or sliced cucumber and blueberries and squash and salmon. Like just looking for, because it's it's again going back to what we eat. We want to make sure we're not just taking things out to put things in. All right. Our bones depend on it, our brain depends on it, our hormones depend on it. I mean, vascular, I mean, everything depends on it. It all kind of depends on it. Looking at numbers kind of helps you go, is this working for me? Or paying attention to your symptoms, what your body's telling you. With increased reflux, your body is saying, what I'm putting in my stomach doesn't work for me anymore. And so you're paying attention to it, and that's awesome. If, uh, cholesterol is high, or A1C is high, or insulin is high, it's telling you stuff. Sugar, when it was first, the history of sugar is super interesting. It was known to be a drug when it was first discovered, and it was used in the history of slaves and warfare. And we don't understand that the A1C is measuring the how sticky sugar has made our blood. Uh, and what is happening to us when visceral fat kind of comes on the scene, and how that will suck hormones out of being used correctly, and can affect adrenals, testosterone, and then create a loop, right? Where then get stuck. It's always kind of interesting to me going, what came first? This imbalance or this imbalance? Because it all gets so connected together. But I think that when I look at cultures or countries that have longevity associated with them, uh, the research wants to weigh in on one thing or two things, right? And it doesn't look at all the pieces together. Like the blue zone, it's like nobody's talking about the fact that most of these people, most of the lifestyle is on islands where there's a different pace of life, there's a different way of looking at stress. Um, Everybody wants to think that the French have some kind of excuse because they can drink wine and eat bread and cheese. There's food police that governs the freshness of their food. And the more I learn about histamines, the more that that's a huge problem for many of us. And that doesn't exist. They eat their protein at lunch and spend 2 hours having that meal. They teach preschoolers for a 4-course meal. It's a part of their culture that they learn how to do vegetables and fruit. It's brought in. So there's so many different things when we want to just go, oh, the Japanese culture are eating this, or the French are doing this and they get away with it, or the blue zone is not eating meat. There's a bigger conversation about what they're eating, what they're not eating, the freshness of it, the lifestyle around it, their sleep, their stress, all of it. Cool. Anything else? Did we answer all the parts of your question? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just, I've just been searching online, some ideas of what to eat, and I don't want to eat bland.
Right.
But then you mentioned like oatmeal.
So one of the things that I use a lot of that I think is undervalued is I grind pink salt. And so I mostly use salt and pepper, but the reason that I'll use it in the cooking is it does something in culinary arts. They talk about it rendering, like it pulls the flavor to the surface. So it does something with the natural sugars in, so like the difference between just sautéing green beans in olive oil versus sautéing it while you're using like a fresh salt and a fresh pepper is really different. But that also might be my one thing for the day. I mean, oatmeal is tricky because it will stimulate appetite. So a lot of people that do oatmeal in the morning have a hard time. But this is what needs to happen for me right now with the issues I'm having. But you just kind of have to listen to your body. If something is, I think clearing the histamines out of the way actually made more room for me to process something that I wasn't processing before. And now when I look back on it, I'm like, okay, was it really the rice bothering me, or did I have rice every time I had fish and it was really the fish that was bothering me? Like it's, kind of figuring some of that out. So
Well, I'm finding my choices for lunch and dinner are easier. Like last night we had salmon and green beans. Uh, um, well, I fixed mac and cheese for my husband. And lunch I can do turkey and raw vegetables and stuff like that. But breakfast is a hard choice for me. And I've been doing oatmeal.
okay, so you need to think about this. The word breakfast is break fast. That's all it means. And in this country, we have some sort of weird cuisine that we call breakfast.
That's required.
And it's so carb
It's the
heavy.
breakfast menu.
Yeah. Breakfast. It's not breaking the fast, because really, when we break the fast, we have a window to really open up our digestive system and flush our system even more than before. A warm lemon water sometimes is really good for that. But look at what other countries do and see if any of that appeals to you. I do know that sometimes ancestral food, like I know for me, Mediterranean is definitely a better fit than other things. Every time I want to experiment with some kind of Asian cuisine, it's not a fit for me. And there's something I think that imprints on our genetics with our ancestry. We're multiple generations into digesting similar foods. I mean, they talk about Asians their pancreas is like 40% more efficient or something like that. I don't quote me on that, but there's something about that culture that was eating rice and soy for multiple generations, and that their bodies adapted to that. Because it's more than just a generation or two. It's like right, like it's built into their biology because that's their environment too, right? Um, so get away from thinking about American breakfast foods
Mhm.
and start thinking about it just as breaking the fast. Um, sometimes I love starting the day, especially in this warmer weather, with soup. I'll make homemade soups, homemade broths, and just a nice, easy, gentle vegetable soup, maybe with some egg in it, like an egg drop with some vegetables. Sometimes I do that.
Okay.